The man once known as America's mayor opened his mouth, and in a single word, he ignited a firestorm that would burn down his legacy. Rudy Giuliani, once draped in the glow of 9/11 heroism, sat under the studio lights, his voice carrying the brittle edge of someone clinging to relevance. And then it happened. The cameras rolled, the microphones captured it, and a nation heard him dismiss a sitting congresswoman, not just as wrong, not just as misguided, but as something far more insulting. He called Representative Jasmine Crockett a mistake. The word seemed to hang in the air, heavy and cutting. A mistake? As if her existence in Congress, her journey, her voice, her presence as a black woman in the halls of American power was nothing but an accident. It wasn't simply an insult hurled in frustration. It was a declaration, a stripping away of legitimacy. And Giuliani delivered it with the smugness of a man who thought his voice still carried authority, still commanded fear. But the country watching at home felt something different. The insult didn't land as Giuliani expected. Instead of silencing, it sparked. In living rooms across America, in phones lit up with live stream notifications, a murmur of disbelief turned into a roar of outrage. Social feeds erupted. Did he really just say that? A mistake? Is this who Giuliani has become? Within minutes, the clip was already looping endlessly, spliced into TikToks, stitched with captions, replayed with angry emojis. The man who once symbolized leadership was now trending as the embodiment of arrogance. The insult itself was simple, almost dismissive, but its weight was amplified by the moment. America has always wrestled with who belongs and who doesn't, who gets to rise and who gets told to sit down. Giuliani's words didn't just attack Crockett. They reopened an old wound, a centuries-long wound, one that millions of viewers recognized instantly. For immigrant families, for women of color, for young voters who saw themselves reflected in Crockett's rise, the word mistake wasn't political theater. It was personal. The cameras caught Giuliani leaning back, smug, convinced he had landed the blow. He thought the insult would stick to Crockett. He thought he could belittle her into silence. But what he didn't see, what he couldn't understand, was that his insult wasn't damaging her. It was detonating beneath his own crumbling career. His attempt at dominance exposed weakness, bitterness, and a man out of step with the America that was watching. Because America wasn't laughing with him. America was recoiling. Viewers weren't thinking, Giuliani just won. They were thinking, this is a fall from grace so sharp it's painful to watch. Commentators scrambled to capture the shock. Journalists drafted headlines before the segment even ended. And in the corners of social media where Crockett supporters gathered, a storm of fire emojis, fists raised, and hashtags declared the obvious. Giuliani had just crossed a line. And yet, at that exact moment, Crockett remained silent. Silent not because she had nothing to say, but because she was waiting. Her eyes steady, her posture unshaken, she absorbed the insult with the calm of someone who knew the weight of history, who understood that sometimes the most powerful answer is patience. Giuliani mistook her silence for surrender. The viewers at home recognized it as something else, the pause before counterstrike. The insult was no mere word. It was a turning point. A line etched into the story of Giuliani's unraveling. The man who had once wrapped himself in the flag of patriotism had, in a single syllable, shown just how hollow his voice had become. His attempt to erase another leader would instead erase what remained of his own credibility that it was a clash of generations, a clash of values, arrogance versus authenticity. To understand why Giuliani's words struck so bitterly, we have to step back and see who the players really were on that stage. Rudy Giuliani, once the proud mayor of New York, had spent years basking in the glow of being called America's mayor. In the shadow of 9/11, he became a symbol of resilience, a man the nation turned to in its darkest hours. For a time, his presence carried weight. His words resonated. He was more than a politician. He was a figure woven into the fabric of American memory. But history is not static, and legacies can rot from the inside out. By the time he called Jasmine Crockett a mistake, Giuliani was no longer the man the nation once applauded. His career had spiraled into scandal, legal troubles mounting, his reputation reduced to late-night punchlines and courtroom drama. His once commanding stature had shrunk into a spectacle of desperation. He wasn't sitting in that studio as a respected elder statesman. He was there as a man clawing for relevance, clinging to a microphone as if it could still restore the authority he had squandered. And it showed. The arrogance that once read as confidence now dripped with bitterness. His dismissive tone toward Crockett wasn't just about her. It was about him. A man whose influence had evaporated, lashing out at someone who represented the future he could no longer control. His smirk, his leaning posture, the casual cruelty of calling her a mistake, all of it revealed a man out of step with the country unfolding before him. Giuliani wasn't the giant in the room. He was the relic. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, the embodiment of everything Giuliani resented but could not defeat. She wasn't a relic of the past. She was a rising star of the present. Young, sharp-witted, unapologetically herself, Crockett's presence radiated a calm intensity that unsettled her opponents. She carried herself not with arrogance, but with assurance, rooted in the knowledge that she had fought for her place and earned it. Her story resonated with millions who saw her as more than just a congresswoman. She was a symbol, the daughter of America's promise, the reflection of a country diversifying, modernizing, moving forward. Her voice carried the cadence of lived experience, her words cutting not because they were cruel, but because they were true. In Crockett, people saw dignity, authenticity, and a future unafraid of its own identity. This was why Giuliani's insult stung so deeply and why it backfired so quickly. For every viewer who had ever been told they didn't belong, who had ever been dismissed or underestimated, Crockett's presence was validation. And Giuliani's dismissal was a reminder of the arrogance that had long tried to silence them. The contrast could not have been sharper. He represented a fading old guard, bitter and unrepentant. She represented the rising generation, confident and unshaken. It was almost cinematic. The setup of a drama, so clear it felt scripted. The villain entering, weighed down by his scandals, desperate for one last strike. The hero rising, steady, calm, waiting to answer not with noise, but with substance. Giuliani was fighting for his reputation. Crockett was fighting for something far greater. Representation, dignity, the right to stand tall in a nation that had too often told people like her to stay small. The cameras captured it all. Giuliani, fidgeting, smirking, trying to summon his former command to the stage. Crockett, measured, unshaken, eyes steady as if daring him to go further. To the audience, it was clear this wasn't a fair fight. Giuliani came armed with arrogance. Crockett came armed with truth. And truth, in moments like these, has a way of piercing deeper than insults ever could. Giuliani underestimated her. He thought his reputation, his past, his bravado would shield him from consequences. But the stage no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her, and to the millions who saw in her a reflection of themselves. In every way that mattered, Crockett was not the mistake. She was the answer to the mistakes of the past. What began as a routine interview spiraled into a verbal brawl, and every second of it went viral. The studio lights felt harsher now, the air thick with tension. Giuliani leaned forward, his voice sharpening, trying to bulldoze the conversation the way he had done in his prime. He cut across Crockett, dismissing her answers before she could finish. "You're inexperienced. You don't understand the real America," he sneered, the edge of condescension dripping from every word. It was the same playbook he had used for decades: belittle, dominate, overwhelm. But this time the effect was different. Crockett did not flinch. She didn't raise her voice or let his interruptions knock her off balance. Instead, she waited for him to finish, letting the weight of his arrogance hang in the air, and then delivered her reply with precision. The real America isn't defined by men who cling to power. It's defined by people who refuse to be silenced. The line landed like a thunderclap. Viewers watching at home leaned forward, sensing the shift. This wasn't Giuliani's stage anymore. Giuliani, visibly irritated, doubled down. He jabbed at her record, calling her untested and out of her depth. His words carried the bitterness of a man who had tasted power and lost it. He was trying to frame Crockett as small, as unworthy of the platform she had earned. But Crockett knew better. With calm defiance, she countered, "Out of my depth? I represent the very people you forgot about the moment you decided your career mattered more than their lives." Her delivery was sharp but unshaken, a scalpel against his blunt hammer. The clash was magnetic. Viewers weren't just watching a debate. They were witnessing a battle of eras, a contest between fading bravado and rising authenticity. And outside the studio, the world was already reacting. On Twitter, the hashtag began to surge. Hashtag Giuliani Meltdown. Hashtag Crockett versus Giuliani. Meme accounts clipped his sneer, adding captions like, "When your past catches up with you." On TikTok, Crockett's calm retorts were overlaid with dramatic music, turning her into a viral sensation in real time. Giuliani tried to recover. He raised his voice, gesturing wildly, searching for dominance in volume, if not in substance. "You're a mistake, and everyone knows it," he snapped again, hoping repetition would make the insult sting harder. But repetition only revealed desperation. The louder he grew, the smaller he seemed. Crockett, by contrast, grew larger with every word. She didn't shout. She didn't scramble. Instead, she let Giuliani unravel, his ranting becoming background noise to her calm, commanding presence. "If I'm a mistake, then maybe America has been waiting for more mistakes," she answered coolly. "Because mistakes like me are building a country that your kind of arrogance try to break." The audience online erupted. Comment sections flooded with applause emojis, comments like, "She ate him alive," without raising her voice. The rhythm of the exchange turned into a spectacle. Giuliani, red-faced, clung to talking points that sounded like echoes of another decade. Crockett, unbothered, cut through each one, transforming every attack into a moment of empowerment. He mocked her background. She reframed it as strength. He belittled her generation. She cast his as a warning of what happens when power corrupts. Each time he struck, she parried, not with anger, but with truth sharpened into armor. By now, the studio audience wasn't neutral. Even the moderator struggled to contain the storm, stepping in more than once to restore order as Giuliani barreled past time limits. But it was too late. The energy had shifted. This wasn't his showcase anymore. It was hers. On social media, the narrative crystallized. Split screens of Giuliani ranting and Crockett calmly dismantling him became instant GIFs. Headlines flashed across news tickers. "Giuliani unravels as Crockett holds the line." Influencers weighed in, comedians mocked him, and young voters amplified her every word. The debate wasn't just happening on stage. It was happening in real time across millions of screens, each replay making Giuliani look weaker, each replay making Crockett look stronger. Giuliani sensed it slipping. His face tightened, his voice cracked with urgency. He tried one final angle, attacking not just Crockett, but the movement she represented. "This progressive nonsense is tearing America apart," he barked. But by now, his words had lost their power. They sounded less like conviction and more like fear of a future he no longer recognized. Crockett let him finish, and then, with the same unshaken calm, she answered, "What tears America apart isn't progress. It's people too afraid of change to let the country live up to its own promise." It was simple, direct, and devastating. Viewers described it as the moment the ground tilted. Giuliani wasn't the authority anymore. He was the cautionary tale. The exchange that had started as a routine back and forth was now a viral firestorm, a digital tidal wave sweeping across platforms, amplifying Crockett's words and Giuliani's unraveling. What Giuliani thought would be an easy dismissal had become a national moment of reckoning. In one line, Crockett dismantled decades of Giuliani's career, and the crowd knew they had witnessed history. The air was already charged. Giuliani's voice had grown ragged, the rasp of a man shouting against the tide, while Crockett's calm poise only magnified his unraveling. And then it happened, the moment that turned a heated exchange into a generational flashpoint. Giuliani leaned in once more, his words trembling with fury. "You don't belong here," he spat, his face red, his hands trembling with frustrated gestures. "You are a mistake, just like every policy you stand for. People like you don't build America. People like me do." It was an insult sharpened into a weapon, delivered with the force of a man trying to reclaim lost power. But in that very moment, the insult became his undoing. Crockett did not raise her voice. She didn't even blink. She leaned forward slightly, her tone steady, her words crisp as glass shattering in the silence. "Mr. Giuliani," she said, each syllable deliberate, "if I'm a mistake, then it's a mistake America needed. Because the truth is, your career, your legacy, your so-called greatness, that was the real mistake. And the country has spent years cleaning up the mess you left behind." The words landed like a thunderclap. The room froze. The moderators exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or let history write itself. Giuliani blinked, stunned, his mouth opening but no words coming out. It was as if Crockett had pulled the last thread holding his legacy together, and in an instant, it unraveled before millions of eyes. And then, almost on cue, the reaction poured in. Gasps from the live audience. A sharp intake of breath that spread like a wave. On social media, the clip exploded within seconds. Hashtag Crockett versus Giuliani became the #1 trending hashtag. TikTokers looped her line over dramatic soundtracks, adding captions like "the moment Giuliani's career ended." On Twitter, commentators declared it the quote of the year. Headlines on digital outlets updated in "Crockett delivers knockout blow. Giuliani shattered on live TV." The magic of the moment was not just the line itself, but how she delivered it. Calm, unshaken, almost surgical. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't ranted. She simply stated the truth and let it detonate. Giuliani, who had built his reputation on bombast, found himself silenced not by volume, but by clarity. It was a slow-motion collapse. In replay after replay, the networks stretched the moment, zooming in on Giuliani's stunned expression, his lips quivering, his eyes darting as if searching for a retort that never came. The split screen told the whole story. On one side, Crockett, confident, unbroken, radiant with the force of authenticity. On the other, Giuliani, shrunken, diminished, a man watching his relevance evaporate in real time. And the people responded. Immigrant families replayed her words at dinner tables, nodding with pride. College students blasted the clip on projectors in dorm lounges, chanting her line in unison. Civil rights leaders reposted the moment with captions like, "This is what generational power looks like." Even late-night comedians, who had long feasted on Giuliani's scandals, pivoted instantly to celebrating Crockett's takedown as a cultural reset. For Giuliani, it wasn't just a bad night. It was devastation. His defenders scrambled, trying to spin the moment as just words or taken out of context. But the spin didn't matter. The image was seared into the national memory. Rudy Giuliani, the man once called America's mayor, silenced, diminished, undone by a single sentence from a woman he tried to belittle. And yet, there was something more powerful than the humiliation itself. Crockett's line carried a deeper resonance. It wasn't just about Giuliani. It was about every voice that had ever been dismissed, every leader who had ever been told they didn't belong, every young politician who had been labeled too green, or too radical, or simply a mistake. Crockett's response became a rallying cry. She wasn't just speaking to Giuliani. She was speaking to America, reminding the country that progress has always come from those the establishment tried to erase. The fallout was immediate. Cable news replayed the moment on an endless loop. Analysts dissected it with the gravity of a historic turning point. Conservative commentators sputtered with outrage, while progressive commentators declared it the defining mic drop of the decade. The narrative had flipped, and Giuliani wasn't just on the losing end of an argument. He was on the losing end of history. And through it all, Crockett remained calm. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply leaned back in her chair, her expression composed, as if to say, this wasn't about scoring points. This was about truth. And truth, when spoken with courage, doesn't need theatrics. It speaks for itself. For Giuliani, silence was the cruelest punishment. His face, once commanding, now read like a man who knew he had lost not just an argument, but the last vestiges of credibility he still clung to. The meltdown was complete, and America had witnessed it live. One insult intended to silence instead gave rise to a new voice of power. The moment Giuliani's words collided with Crockett's response, the world outside the studio moved faster than he could have imagined. Within minutes, newsrooms rushed to break the story. Headlines screamed across every platform. Crockett eviscerates Giuliani on live TV. From America's mayor to national embarrassment, cable hosts cued the clip on repeat, analyzing every second like sports commentators replaying a championship knockout. The phrase, "the real mistake," became the defining soundbite of the night, echoing through millions of living rooms. But the fallout extended beyond the news cycle. Social media transformed the clash into a cultural phenomenon. Memes sprouted like wildfire. One viral tweet paired Giuliani's stunned silence with a caption, "When your career ends mid-sentence." TikTok creators layered Crockett's words over dramatic music, turning her into a symbol of generational change. Instagram pages posted side-by-side images. Giuliani in his 9/11-era glow versus Giuliani, red-faced and trembling, across from a calm and composed Crockett. The contrast was devastating, and it spread everywhere. Giuliani's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Hashtag Giuliani meltdown. Hashtag Crockett versus Giuliani. Hashtag the real mistake. Hashtags flooded timelines. For the younger generation, many of whom had only known Giuliani through scandal and ridicule, this moment felt like the final nail. For older viewers, it was whiplash. How had the man once revered as a national figure fallen so completely? The answer played out in real time, in the raw footage of him unraveling under pressure. Meanwhile, Crockett's star rose. Progressive commentators hailed her as a voice of the future. Community leaders lifted her words as validation for those who had long been dismissed. For immigrant families, for women of color, for every young person who had been told they didn't belong, Crockett's composure was more than political. It was personal. She had not just defended herself. She had defended the dignity of millions. Commentators drew parallels to past political turning points. Kennedy facing Nixon, Obama silencing hecklers, leaders whose words and presence redefined the moment. Crockett, they said, had joined that lineage, not by seeking it, but by embodying it. Her calm, her authenticity, her refusal to shrink had done more than win a debate. It had shifted the narrative of who gets to lead and who gets to be heard. And what of Giuliani? His defenders scrambled, but their efforts rang hollow. They argued he was provoked, that his words were misinterpreted, that he had simply misspoken. But the footage told the truth. The footage revealed the sneer, the venom, the arrogance, and the collapse that followed. Giuliani wasn't just beaten in an exchange. He was exposed. His downfall was not a sudden collapse, but the inevitable conclusion of arrogance left unchecked. Crockett had simply held up the mirror, and America didn't like what it saw. As the dust settled, the deeper story emerged. This was never just about two people sparring on air. It was about what they represented. Giuliani symbolized the old guard, clinging to past glory, dismissive of progress, blind to his own decay. Crockett symbolized the new, dignity without arrogance, truth without theatrics, resilience born of struggle. Their clash wasn't an accident. It was the story of America in miniature, the old making way, reluctantly and bitterly, for the new. And for once, the moral was clear. Arrogance falls, dignity rises, lies crumble, truth endures. Giuliani's attempt to erase Crockett's legitimacy ended up erasing what remained of his own. In trying to make her small, he revealed his own weakness. In trying to silence her, he amplified her voice louder than ever before. The image lingered, Crockett steady, Giuliani unraveling. One represented the mistakes of the past. The other represented the promise of the future. And across the nation, people felt the shift. It wasn't just entertainment. It was inspiration, a reminder that when truth stands firm, arrogance cannot prevail.